Well, good morning, everyone. I am back and we've got an episode of Going Down the Wormhole. And this is going down the wormhole is about diving deep into what connects us with nature. And I have the absolute pleasure to introduce you to Lee Sullivan. Many of you may know her. She's a bit of a Insta famous person out there with Urban Veggie Patch, and she's a real inspiration. And she's got an amazing story of why she started gardening and the not almost just the big things of eating your first vegetable, but the smaller subtle things that maybe you wouldn't think about in terms of mental health. So I'm really excited, and I encourage you all to ask questions, whether that be on the topics we're talking about or maybe about gardening. Lee's got tons of experience, and we've only got a limited time with her. So yeah, please ask questions as much as you can, and we'll get to them on the comment box below. This episode, as I said, is about the benefits of gardening. And when we think about the benefits of gardening, the first thing that comes to our mind is, yes, grow your own food. It's going to be healthy. I'm going to reduce food miles. I'm going to have some tasty, fresh food at the back of my back door. But there seems to be some other benefits that are a bit more subtle, but have just as much effect. And I'm talking about connecting with nature and the mental health that is influenced by that. So me and Lee had a bit of chat before this live, and we went deep. We went down the wormhole. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce Lee. Lee, hello. How are you today?
Good. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks. That intro went for a little bit too long. I realized you just there patiently on your lovely couch, comfortable. For the viewers out there, could you please a little rundown of who you are and why you fell in love with gardening?
Yeah, sure. I actually have only been gardening for around 4 years. I started after I had my first child. I kind of when he started, around the time that he started solids, I started to become really concerned about what I was putting in his body.
Wow.
And that was kind of what led me to starting a garden, which is funny because before I wasn't even thinking about it for me, but as soon as I had a kid, I suddenly really cared about what he was eating. And that kind of just sent me on a bit of a journey of looking into what's on our food, like where our food comes from, things like what you just said, food miles, like all that kind of stuff. I just started doing a ton of research and a ton of reading, and I just came to the conclusion that the only way to truly know what was on my food was to grow it myself, basically. At the time, we were in a really, really small backyard. Like we were in a townhouse, so we had a concrete backyard that was not very big. And I procrastinated for a long time because I was like, no, there's not really any way I could grow food here. And then one day I just decided, no, I'm just going to do it. So we basically set up, I don't know what, it probably would have been about 7 meters by 1 meter long. And we just did it in one day, set it all up and bought some seedlings, started very simply. And it all just kind of went from there.
Wow. Well, I'm interested to know, what was the tipping point? What was that? That was lots of little things, or one big thing that just made you go, okay, I'm going to do it? Because a lot of people out there watching are really new to growing, and it can be a challenging thought. They're like, wow, there's so much to consider. There's so many different plants, and I just don't know where to start. What was it for you?
It is a super overwhelming thing, and I remember that was the thing that held me back the most. Was I was just, well, I didn't know what I was doing at all, but because of that, it felt so overwhelming to me that I really did hold off on it. I think probably my son was he would have been 2 when we actually started. So I kind of sat on it for maybe a year. And there wasn't really like an exact tipping point, but I think it had just been on my mind and was something I was interested in for a really long time. And the more I read, the more I realized that basically like growing our own food is the way that we're meant to live, I believe anyway.
Yeah.
And I think it was just one of those days where it was a Saturday, we didn't have anything planned, and we're just like, let's just do it. That's usually how I do things. I'm a huge planner, and I'm just like, yeah, let's just do this massive thing. Like,
That's it's like you almost planted the seed then. Now you've been on a 4-year journey and you've grown some amazing vegetables. There is the infamous photo of you with these giant carrots. I'll have to show everyone to just. This is what I'm talking about. When I mean giant carrots, these carrots went viral on the internet. I
have to say they shocked me too. I wasn't expecting them to be this big.
Oh, that's hilarious. Okay. Where are So these, can everybody see that? Let me know if you can't. Let me see where these giant carrots are. These are the giant carrots they're humongous. They're like, how much do they even weigh each one? It's like a meal for each one.
I didn't actually weigh them. I probably should have. I can't remember the exact length. I feel like maybe they were around 70 centimeters.
What?
Yeah, something like that.
Were they hard to pull out? Was it like a day to just yank them?
It was like an excavation.
That is so cool.
They'd actually, my raised beds are, I think they're about 45 centimeters high, my raised beds, and they're on the earth, like they don't have a base in them. So the carrots had actually grown through the beds down into the ground. So yeah, it was a big job getting them out, I have to say.
That's unreal. And just reflecting back on what you've said, that 4 years ago you started, and you can see giant carrots in your hand, but in the background there is just an abundance of food. How much food do you produce for your family?
We produce a lot. We've only been in our current garden for a year and a half, almost 2 years, but the garden has been set up for about a year and a bit. So I really wasn't sure how much we'd be growing, or it's kind of taking a bit of learning to get the balances right. But I like sharing what we grow as well. Like, I think that's a big part of growing, is sharing your produce. So I often share with my parents or neighbours, or whenever we have excess, we just give it away usually.
Wow, that's so cool. You must be very popular. I had a family member that just come over and
I often have family members come over and go, if I could just grab some lettuce, or I was like, oh, you didn't come to see me, you just came to get some veggies.
I want to dive into your secrets, but I know this live will just get absorbed into it, which would be a great thing. But we came here to dive deep, to go into the wormhole about some other benefits of gardening that may not get spoken about as much. And so what are those little subtle benefits of gardening that you may not have, that may not have been the original intention, but you're like, oh, wow. Now you reflect back, you're like, oh, wow, gardening did do this for my life.
Yeah, well, when I first started out, as I said, it was for health reasons in terms of physical health. And at the time, I had a small amount of postnatal depression. Like, I would say it's mild. It was mild, and I've said this a few times on my Instagram, but I call it postnatal depletion, because that's kind of, I just think that kind of encompasses it better than actual depression. But I didn't even really realize I had it, but I knew kind of something was wrong. And I started gardening for the health of my family, but once I started, I found that it really, really helped with the postnatal depression depletion side of things. And like I really do credit gardening and growing and just everything to do with it for kind of pulling me out of that. It really kind of saved me from kind of going deeper into that, I think. And I mean, the mental health benefits of gardening are very kind of documented. There's so much research out there
So much.
saying, and it's funny, I didn't even know about it at the time, but I can say from firsthand experience that it helps so much with just emotional and mental health. And I know, I mean, I think there's a variety of reasons why, but for me personally, it has really helped. And even like after I've now had a second child, and I mean, I think there's probably a lot of factors involved in this, but I didn't have a similar experience at all with my second child, and I definitely credit having a garden as part of that, you know.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing. I think it's something that the mental health conversation has only really been to the forefront in the last few years, I guess. And we're finding that connecting with nature is a big component to that.
Yeah.
I actually went to a school last week to install about 40 subpods there, and we got to interview a whole bunch of kids, and it was fantastic. And one of the kids, he said in an interview I went for about 3 minutes, he said, "I like to garden because it helps me connect with nature." He said it like 4 times. So he intuitively knew the benefits of doing it. He just kept saying it, and it was just ringing in my ears.
Yeah.
And so you have children that know like those benefits and how important it is to just connect with nature. And then of course on the other end of the spectrum, or the science and research, there's so much out there. Clements Aves is one scientist I admire. He's written a book on biophilia effect. Have you heard of it before?
No, I haven't.
Lee?
No.
Biophilia is I'm not sure where that name, that when it was coined, maybe in the 1900s, but it basically means the love of nature. And of course, the Japanese have been doing forest bathing for so long.
Yeah, green bathing. Is that what you're?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's a researcher at. He's got his PhD. He's German, and he has put all this research and looking into like why we have these elevated moves and boosted immune systems when we step into nature. And he's talking about forests. So I'm not sure if this applies to a smaller garden setting, but I imagine there's some connection there. But it's just amazing the amount of science out there to really back this up. So if anybody's really interested to dive into that a little bit deeper, I'd highly recommend it.
I actually was reading about that not long ago.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, funny. And it was saying about how even just viewing a landscape has shown to reduce stress, reduce anxiety, and even like help you recover from surgery quicker.
Wow.
Yeah.
Unreal.
Yeah, the benefits are amazing.
Yeah, and it's so simple. I feel like sometimes if things are so simple, people just ignore them. It's like,
it's like the easiest thing to
basic, it's simple, and it can help you on multiple levels.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really cool. My next question for you is, you've mentioned you've got 2 children.
Yeah.
So how has gardening shaped the way that you taught your children, or how they've grown up?
Yeah, well, it's actually it has shaped their childhoods big time, because I started early on in my first child's life. So I have pretty much been gardening for their whole lives. So they don't really know anything different. Before I started gardening, I wasn't a hugely outdoorsy person, like, to be honest. And as soon as I started gardening, suddenly I was like, I just loved being outside, loved being in the garden, and just like being in nature, connecting with nature. It just became such an important part of my life. And obviously I've been a stay-at-home mum with my kids since they were born. And so they just do it with me, and so the childhood that they're having is that we're outside more than we're inside, basically.
Wow.
And even just my 6-year-old, obviously my 1-year-old is not really old enough to be hugely involved yet, other than version of helping, which sometimes isn't that. But yeah, like even my 6-year-old, he always says funny things about vegetable. Like he'll be like, "Oh, Mum, is that a cuckoo melon?" If we're in the supermarket and stuff, and like
Oh, wow.
no one would even really know what a cuckoo melon is.
Hilarious.
My 6-year-old does. And yeah, he really, really gets into gardening. He actually just planted his little bed of seeds the other day for he wanted to have his own winter garden. But I think just bringing him up in that environment, and obviously him seeing what it does for me and how much I love it, and then he's watched the process of planting a seed, growing a plant, harvesting and eating it. It's kind of birthed a love for that in him as well. And I just think it's such a gift that you can give your kids to understand and know where their food comes from. And just kind of cultivating respect for, the earth and the way things work, I think is really important. So that's been something that I have worked on with him in particular a lot. And like we homeschool, so we have a good amount of time in the garden most days. So yeah, I really try and get him involved as much as I possibly can. I think it's really important.
How do you, because I've often thought like if you can integrate gardening into a classroom setting, you could talk, of course, biology and maths and science and maybe even language in there. Do you try to do that?
Yes, actually. Last week we did gardening maths, and we were planting seeds, and so he was doing sums with seeds.
Wow. Not little tomato seeds, something.
No, they weren't little. They were broad beans, so they were big. But,
okay, yeah.
But yeah,
that's lovely.
He just loved it. Like we went out into the garden, we were going to plant some, and then he kind of, just did what he called it gardening maths. And then he said to me the next day, "Oh, can we do some more gardening maths?" Like it's just, bringing the garden into everyday life. It really makes it come alive for kids, I think, and really lights it up.
Oh, that's so cool. I love it. Yeah, that's so cool, being able to bring in the maths aspect of it.
Definitely.
And I'm sure it's a bit more engaging if you're really into gardening, and then you're suddenly using seeds and then you're learning maths on top of it.
Yeah.
Like, it seems like a win-win. That's really cool. I'm going to reintroduce what we're doing here. If anybody has just jumped in, I'm talking to Lee Sullivan, going down the wormhole about the benefits of gardening, and not just the big benefits that you get in terms of picking a nice fresh tomato at your back doorstep, but maybe the smaller subtle benefits like growing your children next to gardening, or the emotional benefits as well, and the connection to nature you get from it. And it's really just it's an amazing. That's what I'm learning now from Lee's story. It gives you not only a sense of purpose. I think, just to put it in my words, a sense of purpose there, and ongoing learning, and just a connection with nature that we seem to be missing in everyday life.
Yeah, definitely. I actually think, like, just what you said then, for me, one of the big things that it brought me at a time when I think I needed it was a real sense of identity. And yeah, because I know a lot of mums and dads like will understand this. It's like when you have your first child, nothing can prepare you for it, you know, like you think you know like what it's going to be like, but you don't know.
It's funny because I'm going through the same process right now. I'm like,
and yeah, you can't be prepared for it. And like,
yeah.
I heard something once, and it's exactly what it's like. Someone said, I don't know who the quote's by, but it's like, having a child is like winning the lotto and losing a leg. Like, it's kind of like you've got the most amazing thing ever, but it's so easy just to kind of lose a little piece of, like, kind of lose yourself because you're just so focused on this amazing person that you're looking after, you know.
Wow.
And I think I had just, like I'd lost myself. And it wasn't a matter of going back and finding who I was. I think I needed to find my new identity, you know, and I really found that in gardening, like, and growing, and it really gave me a sense of identity and a sense of achievement, like for me, you know, and just kind of, watching it grow and nurturing it. And it's funny, I was actually thinking last night about this, and you know, I was nurturing my child at the time, and the garden as well, but it was actually at a time where I needed to be nurtured as well. And I feel like my garden nurtured me, you know, and really, just gave me what I needed at that time, to heal from the things that were going on inside of me, I guess.
Wow. What would you like to see? Because for the people watching, they may not know that Lee has a background in psychology, so she has a good understanding of what's going on here in the background process, I imagine. And what would you like to see? Like, what would be your vision, like, for other people? Other mums, maybe.
Like mental health wise, or just
Yeah.
I think if someone's at a point where you're feeling like kind of like you're really just feeling that loss of identity, I think starting a garden is such a good way to go. And I'm not saying that, like, I also would say it's great to talk to people. Like, I wouldn't just say, you know, start a garden and everything will be fine. But I think that it can be such a healing thing. And it's not hard, you know, like it's easy. And if you just start, it can just help you so much in having something for you. Because I think as a mum, it's so easy to just get so caught up in your kids, which is a great thing. I'm not saying that's not a great thing. It's a great thing, but sometimes you just do need something for you. And starting a garden is like just the best thing you can do. I mean, even just in a basic soil level, which I'm sure you probably know this, like there's bacteria in the soil that can trigger the release of serotonin, which is the happy hormone, like, or happy chemical or whatever, and can trigger happiness, you know, like it's, I just think for mums, it's such a great thing because you're doing something for you, you're doing something for your family, you're connecting with nature. Like there is no downside. And if you're feeling kind of like overwhelmed or lost, or like you need something for you, it's such a good thing to try. Like I would just say to anyone who feels that way, or even is procrastinating on starting a garden, like just start. That's kind of like the best. That's kind of the best. It sounds so simple, but it's like, it's so easy to try and get it perfect, you know, like, and I know that that's one thing about gardening too. It's good for perfectionists, I think, because you learn that like it just will never be perfect. But yeah, like I think it's a simple thing, but just start. Like it doesn't have to be perfect. I mean, I'll be honest, like the first beds I used were treated cypress beds. I would never use treated cypress now. But I just needed to start, and yeah, I think that's a big thing for people when they're thinking about starting a garden, is the overwhelming aspect of, well, I don't really know how, but I don't know, there are ways to just do it. And so I would say just do it and feel the benefits. And I mean, even being out in the sun, from a mental health perspective, if you're feeling, like, anxiety, stress, depression, just vitamin D alone can be a huge help. So I think there's no downside to starting a garden and trying it. And I'm pretty confident in saying that you will reap the benefits in many ways.
That's great. That's really good. Really good advice. I think there's so many benefits out there. And like, as you were saying that, I was like, my sister, she's a mum of two, and she really struggles to do things for herself, going out to a yoga class, maybe because she has to think about taking the kids there and all that. But she could just step out in your backyard growing and get something similar, then that's just a huge burden off her chest. But I would like, but she lives in an apartment, and I imagine a lot of people out there live in small buildings. They don't have a backyard. Like, what would you give some advice to help them?
Yeah, well, I think people who are in apartments, or like when I started, I was in a townhouse with literally a square concrete backyard. I think there's many ways that you can grow in that environment, and I would never let space be a hindrance. So pots is obviously one way you can start growing, and there are so many different things that will grow well in pots. So I always say to people, start with herbs and lettuce.
So easy.
Yeah, because it's just easy. It will grow well in pots. It's kind of a cut and come again thing where you can just keep on harvesting from it. And it's easy. Like, it'll just grow usually, as long as you give it sun and water and don't just completely neglect it. But I mean, and in terms of balcony growing and small yards, there are so many products out there that are specifically for that kind of thing. And I think even if you just go to, your local nursery or Bunnings, like, you're going to find that there are a fair few things out there that you can. And also, like, for people who are on Instagram, there are some awesome people on Instagram who,
so true, like yourself.
Follow me. No, who are actually doing that, like, who are growing on their balconies or in their apartment and getting amazing results. So I would say, like, get on there and find them and learn all their tricks.
I've been growing microgreens right now, sunflower seeds, and it's just so easy. Sprinkle it on there, put them in the sun, a little bit of water, and
it's not as hard as you think. I think that's the thing. People kind of, like we've said, people get overwhelmed, but it's not as hard as you think.
We have a question, Lee. It's a good question. What plant makes the best therapist? What do you think, Lee? Makes the best therapist.
Look, maybe tomato. Maybe. I don't know. It's a tough one. I think tomatoes are probably more character building for me, because I've found them difficult. They've taught me a lot of patience. But plant makes the best therapist. Oh, actually, this is not an edible, but for me it would be dahlias.
Oh, they're beautiful.
Yeah.
No, that's flowers. Now, looking into a dahlia is just like, it's like a big mind warp.
Yeah, they are absolutely amazing. And I started out growing edibles and then kind of moved into flowers as well. And dahlias for me are amazing therapy. Like, I could stare at them all day and they just make me happy.
Wow.
So that would be what I would say, I think.
Cool. Okay.
That's a good question.
Dahlias. That is a really good question. I'm gonna see if there's if there's any other questions, please just shout them out. Again, for anybody who just tuned in, we are talking about the benefits of gardening, not only the big juicy tomato that you will grow at your back doorstep, but maybe more some of those subtle benefits of gardening in terms of mental health and growing your children next to gardening as well. I'd like to jump back into your virtual garden and ask you some questions, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Here we go. All right. So, Cuckoo Melons.
Cuckoo Melon, yes.
Cuckoo Melons. Tell us about there is a few there.
Yes.
Is there?
There we go.
Oh, there we go. So for everyone, this is a cuckoo melon. Lee, what is a cuckoo melon?
A cuckoo melon, I think I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's part of the cucumber family. I'm not 100% sure. But do you think? Do you know?
I knew once upon a time, but I'm doubting myself. I think you're right. I think it is. It definitely is, because they pickle it like a little gherkin. Now I remember. I think it's native from South America.
Yeah. So yeah, basically they are teeny tiny little. Well, they're kind of like a cucumber, but they look like a really miniature watermelon.
Watermelon, I know. Yeah.
People think they're kind of going to be like a melon when they see them, because they really look like a watermelon. But yeah, they're more like a cucumber, but they've got a bit of a sour hit at the end, like a lime kind of flavor. They're pretty cool. This was my first year growing them, and yeah, they're a really cool thing to try. Like, I think they're just one of those veggies that's really different and unusual, and something you'd probably never find in the shops. And they're definitely worth trying, and they grow amazingly well.
Is that the vine behind it that they grew from? That's a huge vine. They look prolific.
Yeah, I think I had 3 plants, and that wall is around about, I think about 5 meters or 4 or 5 meters.
Wow.
And they covered the whole wall. Like, they just went crazy.
Unreal. That's so cool.
Yeah.
I've tried one once before, and they go really well on a salad. What do you like them?
Yeah. They're really great on salad. We actually just eat them as snacks a lot of the time.
Oh yeah. Oh cool.
Like, just kind of harvest a ton of them and eat them. But yeah, in salads, I haven't tried this, but I've heard they're really good in stir fries as well.
Wow. Okay.
And
cool. I'll definitely try that.
You can preserve them, and they preserve really well.
Wow. Yeah. Love that. Dahlias, for anybody who was interested in dahlias, magnificent. You can see the detail on the petal there. They're sort of little cups.
Yeah, they're absolutely amazing flowers.
Are there other reasons why you grow dahlias? Beneficial insects?
Not really with the dahlias. I mean, there might be benefits in that way that I'm not aware of, but no, the dahlias I grow purely for beauty purposes. But I do try and have a real good mix of flowers among my edibles, like things like nasturtiums and that kind of thing, which like borage, kind of, that are beneficial plants in the garden in terms of pest control and that kind of thing. So that is kind of a big part of what I do in the garden.
I remember reading one of your posts, and somebody was asking about use of pesticides, and you're like, I don't really use pesticides that much.
No, I don't.
What is your secret? Because you've got such a luscious garden here.
Yeah. Well, I will say, like, my garden is not devoid of pest problems. I think it's something everyone faces, and Yeah. So, but I definitely am committed to not using chemicals on my plants because it kind of defeats the purpose of why I'm growing in the first place.
Hmm.
So for me, I look at it as more a problem solving thing than anything else. And I also am at a point kind of in my gardening journey where I'm not really looking to eradicate pests from my garden.
Mm.
I think they're pests because we see them as pests. Are they actually pests? I don't know. Like, um, so
So true. It's the
I,
same conversation with weeds.
yes, yeah, like it is. It's exactly the same. So yeah, I definitely try and protect my plants as much as I can, especially in the early stages. Like recently, I've had a huge problem with slugs because we've had a really large amount of rain and it's kind of just brought them out in droves, and I've had a lot of seedlings that I didn't want to get eaten. So there are a few methods that you could use, but for me, I just try and cover my plants when they're young. And then usually once they get established, I find it's not that much of a problem, especially if you're kind of companion planting and doing a lot of the other things that you can do to help with that kind of thing. It hasn't been a huge issue in my garden, but I think it's because I've learnt how to companion plant and how to effectively basically protect my plants whilst allowing slugs, I guess, or whatever it might be in the garden. And like I said, like once my plants are established, I don't really mind if a slug wants to eat some of it. It's fine. And I actually heard someone say once that holes in your leaves or holes in a lettuce leaf or something is actually a good, if you look at it as a good thing, because it means that your garden's organic and you're not using chemicals. Like, so
Yeah,
yeah.
that's so true. Have you? What was I going to? Oh, yeah, that's right. I was going to talk about the defense system of a plant, how they have an immune system just like us. And you mentioned companion planting, but have you tried different soils, knowing that you put good compost in here and then maybe neglected one and seen a big difference in terms of pests or growth or?
Generally, like I haven't. I've seen a few people do that kind of thing, and the results are pretty crazy in terms of healthy plant versus non-healthy plant. And I've read a lot of stuff about, actually lately I've been reading about how and you might be able to clarify if this is completely wrong, how healthy plants kind of set off, I don't know if it's scents or something that keeps pests away from them.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
right.
yeah, and yeah. Sorry, go.
No, sorry, I just jumped into my nerd brain because there's a really good book called by Peter Wallam. It's what is it? How trees communicate and feel. The secret life of trees. That's right. How trees.
I heard that book. Yeah.
Have you read it?
I haven't read it, no, but I should.
It's one of my favorite books, and he really gets into the science about how trees are able to communicate with each other, releasing terpenes, releasing gases, and they can warn each other that certain pests are coming. So, hey, you got to create this chemical, guys, because this pest is coming. And when I think about that, I mean, I'm a bit biased, and I feel like a big part of it is the soil. When we have healthy soils, then the plants are a lot more equipped to have the right nutrients, so they can trigger the right immune responses and do all this other stuff. But I haven't actually dived into companion planting enough. So I'd like to hear a few of your tips around it. Like, what have you found really successful?
Yeah, well, actually, one very practical example that I've realized just recently is so I usually do a combination of companion planting with my carrots, where I plant my carrots.
Sorry, Lee, can we see a photo here? Or is that going to be too difficult? Of companion planting? This looks like something.
Yeah, there's a bit of companion planting. So, okay, so on that photo, celery is apparently a cabbage moth deterrent. So
Wow.
yeah, so I've planted, if you can see in that photo, at the front of that bed is celery, and then I've got my chard next to it. So
Yeah.
basically that's kind of like an example of, I would plant my
Mm,
celery, and then I would plant things that cabbage moth would tend to like next
mm,
door to my celery, or interplant them kind of around each other, so that there's somewhat of a deterrent there. And like, I will say that it's not going to guarantee you're never going to get cabbage moth,
right.
but it is something that you can do to help and assist, because, yeah, I mean, you can kind of take all the help you can get sometimes with that kind of thing.
I think that's so true. I remember reading a book about one of the forgotten. He was a scientist in plant science. I think he's like, if a caterpillar's hungry, they're really hungry. I think they're just gonna eat the lettuce. Like, no matter how many deterrents you're gonna do, like, if
Pretty
you've got a
much.
really hungry caterpillar, and I'm like, yeah, I think that's a good point.
You
All of
might
this is it works.
have- yeah.
Curing works, but it can really only go so far. But sorry, you were saying?
No, you're right. Yeah, so I normally plant my carrot seeds, and then I plant radishes in between.
Mm,
And so the thinking behind that is kind of, the radishes grow quick, so you've kind of got like a 5-6 week growth on them. Carrots grow slow. The radishes loosen up the soil and that kind of thing. And that's the reason why I was doing that. But this year I haven't done that. And I've just done carrots, mainly because I think it was just more a time thing, and I just didn't really think much of it at the time. But so my carrots have been getting absolutely annihilated by slugs.
wow.
And someone messaged me on Instagram and said, "Oh, I normally plant radishes with my carrots because the slugs go for the leaves on the radishes rather than my carrot seedlings."
Oh, wow.
And it was
And
a
you
light
don't.
bulb moment for me. And I was like, well, I normally do that too, and never have had a problem with slugs eating my carrot seedlings. And this is the one year I haven't.
Wow.
So I
That's so cool.
interesting.
I
Yeah.
love that. Yeah, there's so much to learn. You're constantly learning, aren't you? Like, I'm quite new to growing. I've
Yep.
only really started the last 2 years, and yeah, you can read as much as you want, but it's till you put it into practice and
Yeah.
figure out in that little microclimate in your backyard, and it gets very specific. There's general
Yes.
principles you can use, but it's really just observe and be like, okay, that worked, that didn't work.
Yeah.
Let's try a different thing next year.
Yeah. Learning by
Wow, that's a really good tip.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, the learning by experience thing, I think, is the biggest thing with gardening. And it's just like, it's your journey, it's your backyard, or it's your space, and you need to learn what is going to work in your space. Because it just there are general rules, but I think, like, different things work in different environments. And like you just said, observation is such a key point when it comes to gardening. Is you do need to spend time observing what's going on in your garden. And I think that's one of the keys to having a successful garden, is knowing your
Mm,
space and watching it and being aware of what's going on,
mm,
because you can kind of nip things in the bud, or work out what's going to work well here and what's going to work well there, just by knowing your garden.
mm,
And yeah, I would say that's one of the things that has definitely attributed to us having a successful garden, is that I just spend a lot of time observing and attempting to understand my space, I guess,
mm.
and the ecosystem. And like, because I think most gardens are their own little microclimate.
Yeah,
um,
yeah,
yeah,
absolutely. I mean, look at that. You have so much diversity within this bed,
yeah,
and
that's one thing I really am passionate about, diversity in the garden, like growing a huge range of things. I really like doing that. It's something I am
it's
passionate about. Yeah.
I mean, from a soil perspective, it is
Yeah.
fantastic because as you probably know, like all of those plants are going to interact with different microbes, and so the diversity on top creates the diversity below.
Yeah.
It's and not only that, of course, having a diversity of food just means that it's going to confuse pests. It's also going to create different climate, different regions for the other plants, and so diversity, but having some thought behind your design helps as well. Like I've gone the diversity and just popped everything in there, and which is kind of cool. It's a cool experiment, but sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe I should have planned it out.
Yeah. Sometimes it's a bit like doing a puzzle. Like you kind of like,
yeah, that's good too.
you know, like I'm not a huge planner. Like I don't draw my garden out before I plant it, but I'm just kind of constantly thinking about it in my head, I guess, and
Right. Wow.
kind of looking at all the different factors of what amount of sun there is there, what are good companions, and even just the difference between winter and summer, like what's going to happen once we hit winter and the sun's going to be in a different spot, and like kind of looking at all those different factors and then deciding what you're going to grow where. Yeah, to me it's like doing a little puzzle, but I really enjoy it.
Are you one of those people that you're at like a dinner table and you're like thinking about you're at a dinner party, you're thinking about your garden, and you're like,
yeah.
that would go really well with that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I can imagine that.
I'm like, oh man, like, you know, I've got a real like block on this. I don't know what I should do here, and I'll be out somewhere and be like, oh my goodness, that's what I should do.
That's true connection to your garden. I'm going to jump back into this view, and I think I'll start to wrap this up. For anybody who just jumped in here, we've been doing a live with Lee Sullivan on the benefits of gardening, and we've spoken about the big stuff of gardening that everyone expects to get from it, the health benefits and growing some fresh lettuce, but then also some of the more subtle benefits in terms of mental health, and perhaps if you have children, raising them with the garden. And we've dived a little bit more into if you're a bit limited with space, and then some tips for you if you're new to growing in terms of soil, companion planting, having diversity, giant carrots, counting beans. So yeah, please just drop any questions or sorry.
Gardening maths, like
Gardening maths. That's going to be a new thing. You might need to coin that. You need to TM that. I think that's got some huge. Yeah, I mean, think about it. You could like get into the maths of the beans and then plant them, and be like, if this bean, that's like your times tables right there. If this bean grows 7 bean pods with this many beans in it, it's like get into algebra, everything. Yeah, exactly. Lee, I want to say thank you so much for joining us today. If people want to get in touch with you, how can they reach out?
Probably my Instagram is really the best way. So Urban Veggie Patch is the name, and yeah, you can find me over there. Thank you for having me.
Great. Oh, it was awesome. I love just getting a bit more of the story behind why you're gardening, and all these other benefits that we don't really talk about. So yeah, it was really fun for me actually, and I hope to maybe have another conversation with you at some point in time, see how that's all going.
Sure.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Lee. Thanks for your time.
Thanks.
And happy gardening.
You too.
Take care.